What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors sits down for what should have been a simple morning interview, only to face 27 seconds of pure disrespect that would change everything? It took just one condescending comment from Joy Behar to turn a casual conversation into a full-blown confrontation so intense, producers had to pull the plug on live television. Before we dive in, make sure you hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments what you think about what you're about to hear. Samuel L. Jackson walked onto the View set that morning expecting a routine promo chat. He was there to discuss his latest film. Nothing controversial, nothing political, just a seasoned professional doing his job. But Joy Behar had other plans. The interview started smoothly enough. The other hosts were friendly, respectful. They asked about his process, his longevity, his iconic roles. Jackson, as always, was composed and charming. The audience laughed at his stories, hung on every word. Then Joy leaned forward. "You know, Samuel," she said with that familiar smirk, "I've always wondered something about actors like you." Jackson raised an eyebrow. "What's that, Joy?" "Well," she began, "you've built a career playing these tough guys, these angry, intimidating characters. Don't you ever worry you're just reinforcing negative stereotypes?" The studio went silent. The air tightened. Jackson's face didn't move, but his eyes said everything. "Excuse me?" he said evenly. Joy kept going, smiling as though she were doing him a favor. "I mean, come on. The shouting, the guns, the aggression. Don't you think that sends the wrong message?" Jackson leaned back, studying her. "Are you seriously asking me that right now?" "I'm just saying," Joy replied, voice dripping with that trademark condescension. "Maybe you could pick something more positive, more inspirational." Jackson repeated the word slowly, almost tasting it. "Inspirational," he said. Then, after a beat, "Lady, do you even hear yourself?" The other hosts shifted nervously. One tried to interject. "Maybe we should move on." But Joy cut her off. "No, I think this is important," she insisted. "Samuel, you've got influence. Why not use it to show better examples instead of all this anger and violence?" Jackson's jaw tightened. "You want to lecture me about my career choices?" "I'm not lecturing." Joy shot back, defensive now. "I'm just asking questions. You can't deny a lot of your characters are problematic." Jackson's tone dropped, low, controlled, unmistakably dangerous. "Problematic? You think my work is problematic?" Camera operators exchanged looks. The producers were signaling frantically from offstage. The tension was suffocating, but Joy pressed on. "All I'm saying is that representation matters. And when young people see you constantly playing these angry roles, what kind of message does that send?" Jackson leaned forward now. No smile, no filter. "Let me get this straight. You think I should only play characters that make you comfortable?" "That's not what I said. No!" Jackson cut her off. "That's exactly what you said. You want me to play safe, harmless roles that don't challenge anyone, that don't make anyone think." "I want you to be responsible," Joy snapped, her voice rising. "You have a platform. Use it better." The words hung there like a spark over dry wood. Jackson didn't move for a full second. Then, in a voice so calm it was almost chilling, he said, "Responsible? You want to talk about responsibility?" "Yes," Joy said quickly, still convinced she was on solid ground. "Actors should think about the impact of their choices," Cousin nodded slowly. "All right then, let's talk about that." He turned fully toward her, no longer the guest, but the authority in the room. "You know what's irresponsible, Joy," he said, "sitting on national television and reducing a 30-year career to some lazy stereotype." Behar opened her mouth, but he raised a hand. "No, you've had your turn. Now it's mine." The room froze. Even the audience stopped breathing. "You want to know about my career?" Jackson continued, his voice rising with each word. "I've played teachers, fathers, Mentors, heroes, complex human beings with depth and soul. But you reduce all that to angry black man with a gun. For the first time, Joy's smirk faltered. I never said anything about race, she stammered. Jackson leaned in, eyes locked on hers. You didn't have to. You didn't have to. Jackson shot back, his tone razor-sharp. Your implications were clear enough. The other hosts began shifting nervously, trying to step in before things went too far. But it was too late. The confrontation had a life of its own now. I think you're being overly sensitive, Joy said. That was the spark, the phrase that detonated everything. Jackson froze, then slowly leaned forward. His voice dropped to that deep, dangerous growl that once made movie villains tremble. Did you just call me overly sensitive? The temperature in the studio seemed to plummet. The audience stopped breathing. The crew, sensing disaster, went silent behind the cameras. I'm just saying maybe you're reading too much into my comments, Joy replied, her confidence cracking just a little. Jackson's gaze never left hers. No, Joy, you don't get to walk that back. You questioned my intelligence, my integrity, and my career. And now you're telling me I'm too sensitive about it? Look, Samuel, I think we're getting off track here. One of the co-hosts tried to interject, desperate to calm the tension. But Jackson cut her off. No, we're not off track. We're finally on it. He turned toward Joy again, his voice steady but rising with power. You think you can sit here behind this desk and lecture me about how I should live, work, and represent myself? Joy's jaw tightened. I have every right to ask questions. That's what we do here. Questions. Jackson let out a short, humorless laugh. Those weren't questions, Joy. That was you trying to put me in a box, trying to turn me into some kind of problem that needs to be fixed. I never said you were a problem, Joy shot back. Defensive now. You didn't have to say it, Jackson said. It's in your tone, your smirk, your attitude since the second I sat down. You've been talking down to me this whole time like I'm a case study, not a man. The producers were waving their arms off stage trying to signal a commercial break, but the control room knew they couldn't cut away. Not yet. Not during this. Then Joy made her biggest mistake. I think you're overreacting, she said flatly. All I did was ask some simple questions. Jackson's eyes widened, that slow, deadly look everyone in Hollywood recognized. He rose from his chair. The audience gasped. Simple questions? He said, voice booming now. Let me tell you about your simple questions, Joy. When you sit there and imply that my career is harmful, that my art is irresponsible, that's not simple. That's arrogant. Joy stayed seated now, her arms folding defensively. The confidence that once filled her voice was gone. You want to know what's really irresponsible? Jackson continued, his voice steady, but every syllable landing like a hammer. It's sitting on national television, with millions watching, and making assumptions about someone's character because of the roles they play. I wasn't making assumptions, Joy said weakly. Yes, you were. Jackson fired back instantly. You looked at me and saw nothing but the characters I've played. You didn't see the man who's been married to the same woman for over 40 years. You didn't see the man who's mentored young actors, helped them find their voice in an industry that tries to silence them. You didn't see the man who gives back, who builds, who cares. You saw what you wanted to see. The audience was dead silent now. Even the camera operators had stopped moving. Jackson's voice softened, but only slightly. You saw a stereotype, something you could criticize, control, fix. Joy opened her mouth to speak, but Jackson raised a hand. And you know what the worst part is? You think you're helping. You think you're being progressive. But what you're really doing, Joy, is trying to police how I express myself as an artist. That's not true, she said, but her voice was trembling now. Isn't it? Jackson challenged. You want me to play safe roles. Characters that make you comfortable, that don't force anyone to think too hard or feel too much. That's what this is really about, isn't it? Comfort. He began pacing slightly, the authority in his voice commanding every inch of the stage. Do you know how insulting it is to have someone tell you that your life's work, your art, is wrong because it doesn't fit their idea of what's acceptable? The other hosts had given up trying to save it. They just sat there, stunned, watching one of the greatest actors alive dismantle a talk show in real time. I've spent 3 decades building a career, Jackson continued, turning back toward Joy. 3 decades choosing roles that challenge me, that tell real stories, and you think you can sit there and reduce all of that to a label? Problematic. Joy shifted uncomfortably, glancing toward the cameras, searching for an exit that wasn't there. I think you're taking this too personally, she said finally, almost whispering it. Jackson froze. The look he gave her could have melted steel. Too personally, he repeated slowly. Joy, my career is personal. My art is personal. When you attack that, you're attacking me. I wasn't attacking anything. Yes, you were. Jackson cut in, voice sharp but quiet, the kind of tone that commands silence. And the fact that you can't even see it makes it worse. You're so comfortable, so protected by your position, that you don't even realize when you're being disrespectful. Joy's head snapped up. Protected? What's that supposed to mean? Jackson locked eyes with her. It means privilege, Joy. Her face stiffened instantly. Privilege? She repeated, her voice brittle. What privilege? Jackson didn't hesitate. The privilege of never having to think about how people see you. The privilege of never having to defend your humanity every time you walk into a room. That's what, the audience erupted. Some gasping, some clapping, others frozen in disbelief. And Joy Behar, for once in her career, had nothing to say. Jackson stared at her, disbelief flickering in his eyes. The privilege, he said slowly, of sitting behind that desk and thinking you can judge other people's life choices. The privilege of believing your opinion about my career matters more than the decades I've spent building it. I have a right to my opinion, Behar snapped, her voice tightening. You do, Jackson replied evenly. But you don't have the right to be disrespectful. You don't have the right to reduce my work to stereotypes. And you definitely don't have the right to lecture me about responsibility when you clearly don't understand the first thing about what I do. The tension was unbearable now. The studio air felt charged, every word hitting like static. Both of them were locked in, neither willing to retreat. The next line, everyone knew, would decide whether this stayed an argument or exploded into something far worse. Behar's face reddened. She hadn't expected to be challenged this hard. Not here. Not on her own turf. Her voice sharpened with bitterness. You know what? She said. Maybe the problem isn't your roles. Maybe the problem is your attitude. The words dropped like poison into the silence. Jackson froze. My attitude? He said softly, his tone dangerous. Yes, your attitude. Behar pressed on, unaware she'd just crossed a line she couldn't uncross. You come in here acting like you're above criticism, like no one has the right to question you. Jackson's hands tightened at his sides. You think I have an attitude problem? I think you have a problem with authority, Behar shot back, her voice rising. You don't like being challenged by people who don't worship the ground you walk on. Producers were signaling frantically for a commercial break, but it was far too late. The confrontation had taken on a life of its own. Jackson let out a low laugh, dark, humorless. Authority? He echoed. You think you represent authority here? I represent the audience, Behar said hotly. I ask the questions people want answered. No, Joy, Jackson said, his laughter cutting off abruptly. You represent everything that's wrong with this business. You represent the entitlement, the self-righteousness, The smug belief that tearing down other people somehow makes you relevant. Bihar's mouth fell open. "How dare you?" she sputtered. "I've been in this business for decades. I've earned my place at this table." Jackson tilted his head. "Have you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've earned your place by being controversial, not by being good at what you do." The words landed like a slap. Bihar's face flushed crimson. "You arrogant piece of work!" she shouted. "Who do you think you are? I know exactly who I am," Jackson replied, his tone calm and lethal. "I'm someone who's earned respect through talent and hard work, not someone who got famous by running their mouth and tearing other people down." "That was it." Behar shot to her feet, finger trembling as she pointed at him. "You think you're better than everyone else? You think because you're some big movie star, you can come in here and disrespect me on my show?" Jackson didn't flinch. "Your show?" he asked coolly. "I thought this was The View, not the Joy Behar Hour." The audience groaned. Even the co-hosts winced. The truth of it stung. "This is my workplace," Behar screamed, completely losing her composure. "And I don't have to sit here and take abuse from some has-been actor who thinks he's too good for honest questions." The gasp from the audience was instant. Even by Behar's standards, the insult was nuclear. Jackson's expression didn't change, but his voice dropped to a whisper so cold it sent a shiver through the room. "Has-been?" he repeated. "Did you just call me a has-been?" Behar's eyes widened. She knew she'd gone too far, but pride wouldn't let her back down. "If the shoe fits," she muttered. Jackson nodded slowly, as if sealing something inside himself. Then he turned toward the camera, looking straight into the lens. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice calm, deliberate, unshakable. "You just witnessed something remarkable. You watched someone reveal their true character on live television." He turned back to Behar. Behar was now standing behind her chair as if using it for cover, her confidence gone. "You want to call me a has-been?" Jackson said, stepping forward, his voice low but gathering strength with every word. "Let's talk about careers, Joy. Let's talk about legacy." He gestured broadly, his tone now commanding the entire studio. "I've made over 150 films. I've worked with every major director in Hollywood. I've played men who were broken, men who were brave, men who challenged audiences to think. For 3 decades, I've brought complex, meaningful characters to life." His voice climbed to that unmistakable crescendo, the same power that had silenced movie theaters for years. "And what have you done? What's your contribution to the world, Joy? Sitting behind a desk, tearing down people who actually create something? People who actually build culture while you sit there picking it apart?" Behar opened her mouth to speak, but Jackson cut her off with a sharp wave of his hand. He wasn't finished. "You want to lecture me about responsibility?" he said, voice now like thunder. "About the message I send? What message do you send, Joy? What do you contribute to society, besides negativity and division?" The control room was chaos. Producers were yelling for a cut to commercial, cameras shaking as the crew scrambled. But Jackson's words filled the room. No one dared move. "I came here today," he continued, "to talk about my work, to share something positive with your audience. But instead, I got ambushed by someone who thinks controversy is the same thing as relevance." He began walking toward the edge of the stage, his composure steady, his authority absolute. "You know what's really sad, Joy?" he said, turning slightly toward her. "You had a chance, a real chance, to have a meaningful conversation with someone who's lived, who's seen things, who's got stories that might have inspired people. But you were too busy trying to score cheap points to actually listen." Bihar's expression cracked. Panic flickered across her face as she realized the damage she'd done. "Samuel, wait," she blurted out, her voice trembling. "Maybe we got off on the wrong foot. Why don't we start over?" Jackson stopped. Slowly he turned back to face her, the studio utterly silent. "Start over?" he repeated, his tone laced with quiet contempt. Lady, there's no starting over from what just happened here." He stepped closer, his gaze unwavering. "You showed everyone exactly who you are today." Then, turning back to the main camera, his voice softened, but carried with chilling clarity. "To anyone watching at home, remember this moment. Remember what happens when ego gets in the way of basic human decency. And remember that respect is earned, not demanded." With that, Samuel L. Jackson walked off the view stage, leaving behind a stunned studio audience and one of the most explosive television moments in recent memory. The camera lingered on Joy Behar's face, frozen, pale and speechless, before the show finally, mercifully, cut to commercial. The confrontation was over, but its shockwaves would ripple for years. In just under 30 minutes, viewers had watched the complete dismantling of a television host's credibility by one of Hollywood's most respected actors. It was, unmistakably, a masterclass in how to handle disrespect with dignity, intelligence, and devastating effectiveness.